The recognition of women's right to vote in South Africa resonates with the ethos of International Women's Day. Now, this day provides a timely moment to reflect on the advancement made by women in South Africa since the dawn of democracy in 1994. Now, to get more insight on challenges faced by women in politics, we're joined by Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster, the co-founder and deputy leader of BOSA. Nobuntu, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I want to touch on just maybe a general picture from your perspective as a woman in politics. I mean, how would you sum up this picture from your perspective as somebody who is within politics, has been within politics?
Look, it has been interesting to experience what it's like to be a woman in politics because, first of all, there is the notion or the perception that there are a lot of women leaders in politics, and that's not true. Because even if you look at any of the political parties, particularly top political parties in this country and on the continent, you'll see that while there's representation, you hardly ever have a woman who makes it either to being in the top of a political party as the president or the deputy president or that kind of thing. It doesn't happen. And there's reason for that. I think that the space is very much a patriarchal space, and that is a reflection of society, really. It is how women are viewed. Women are viewed as being able to contribute, as being able to have a voice, but not necessarily the ones who will lead. It is the ones who will work, and women work hard. So it's useful to have them, even in business, to have them in top leadership, but not necessarily as the ultimate leader, because women are not viewed in society as being leaders. We still have a society that doesn't view women as leaders. I'll give you an example. I was at a community meeting not very long ago, maybe 6 months ago or so. There were about 700, 800 people there. I'd say about 600, 700 of those people were women. But the community committee was all men, save for the woman who was the secretary who took down the minutes. In that meeting, when you were listening to the issues of the community, it's the woman who knew. When you were listening to the solutions that are brought to the community, it was the women who are bringing the solutions and who are actually working in the community and leading in the community. But when it comes to the actual positions of leading, it was all men. And that shows you that women, as much as they're known to be useful, they're known to be enterprising, they're known to be able to get things done and to actually lead, they aren't seen officially as leaders.
But why is there that disconnect? Where do you think that comes from? And it's not only a South African problem, Nobuntu. It's a worldwide problem. I mean, we can name a handful of female leaders in the world at the moment, and there's still a lot of countries. I mean, one scholar once wrote that America decided to go with Donald Trump, who has questionable leadership ethos in comparison to a woman, a topic for another day.
Yeah.
But I mean, you look at those kind of issues and you say, it's not a South African problem, it's a world problem. But where do you think the disconnect is? As you say that women actually do the job, but the top positions are seldom given to women, particularly in politics.
I think it's because we have not seen enough of it. And so for me, my position and my sense is that to see something, you've got to become it, and you've got to be it. So I'm here, I'm a co-founder of a political party, I'm a deputy leader in a political party because we have to see more of that. But I've got to go and be that, and I've got to go and lead as that in order for society to start to see more of that. I think that the more we see women leading in politics, the more we see women leading in society, the more then we will start to embrace that as a society. I really think the issue is simply that women are not being given the platform to lead at that level. And once women are given that platform and are able to lead in that level and are able to create a different picture of what leadership looks like, then we'll start to see more women coming into. So the disconnect is the fact that we're not seeing it. So we see it in that we know that women do things, but we're not seeing it in the positions. We're not seeing it in the upper echelons of business, of society. We're not seeing women there. And it's up to us as society to do that. Put women in leadership, vote for women to lead, vote for women presidents, and then that's when we'll start to see change.
Have we seen a change? And I'm using the word deliberately, change, in that there's always been talk that we are moving towards a certain direction. Are we seeing that, or is it just on paper? Is it just talk?
We're not seeing that because, for example, when you look at JSE-listed companies, only 25% of JSE-listed companies have women in executive positions. When you look at even the educational, the academic sector, academia, you have a handful of women who are deans. You look throughout different industries, and it always seems like there's change and there's transformation because we see the few. But really, in reality, there isn't. Now I want to come to politics. And, you know, we have one of the highest representations of women politicians in parliament. We have 47%. We're second only to Rwanda that has 68 or so percent. And even then, you have to understand that often you find that, for example, in Rwanda, it is almost a wide-known fact that those women who sit in those positions are actually proxy for the agendas of men. And that is the same in South Africa as well. Because if we have 47% of women parliamentarians in this country, we should see things changing for women in this country. We should not be having only 25% of women in executive positions. We should not be having the issues that I'm talking about, even in society, if it is to the benefit of women to have those women. And so you make the conclusion then that they're not there for the benefit of women and representing really the issues of women and of society as a whole. Because as we speak now, we have a Speaker of Parliament who has been charged with corruption. And to whose benefit is that?
You speak about women being proxies, and one can even go as far as saying that it's for aesthetics for a party to say 50% of our leadership is women. How do we move from that then to using quotas? I mean, it goes back to the issue of race in South Africa, sport and other things, where we're saying that we need to put people in the Springboks and because of what they can do, not because of color. Would you say it's the same thing in that we need to start seeing women being brought to positions because of what they can do, not because of being women, as it were?
Absolutely, I do think so. But that starts with creating an enabling environment for women to be able to lead, an enabling environment for women to be able to thrive as leaders. The environments generally in politics are very patriarchal. And so if you have an environment that is isolating to a woman, it's unlikely that they will thrive in that environment and that they will instinctively and naturally and organically rise to leadership. So you have to create, and the responsibility of people like myself who are in leadership in political parties is to make sure that it is an environment that is conducive for a woman to be able to thrive, that is conducive for a woman to be able to organically lead. And for instance, in our party, you know, the natural and default position of women when we started the party was to say, we need to have a women's league. And I pushed back against that because I said, you know, what will happen if we immediately, and I'm not saying it will never happen, but what will happen if we immediately have a women's league is that women will be relegated to leadership in the women's league and will not take leadership in the mainstream leadership of the party. As a new party, it's important that we first establish a leadership that is diverse, that is representative of young people, of different races, of women. And then we can start to think about various desks that then will give opportunity for others to lead for those particular groups in society. But the important thing to be able to do is to say that you have an environment that allows women, and we have a candidate list that I can say I'm proud of. I think we can do better, but I'm proud of the quality and caliber of women and even the number of women that we have on our candidate list, because that's what we've done, to say let women lead. As they lead in society and in their constituencies, let them lead in the party as well.
Because I can think from the top of my head right now that, and we don't know the final list of the ballots. How many women faces are we going to see on the ballot?
There won't be a lot.
Even BOSA will not give us a women face.
Even BOSA yet. Even BOSA yet will not give you a woman face, but it will. Yeah. It will in the future.
So again, to my point, Nobuntu, in that you say the environment has to be conducive. But how then does it become conducive if that environment is still run by men?
So the environment mustn't be run by men. It mustn't be run solely by men. And, you know, what happens, because of what we've seen of women being proxies, What happens is that there's an assumption, for instance, when you're a deputy leader, that you don't have decision-making power as a deputy leader should in your party because you're a woman. And that shouldn't be the case. That isn't the case. In my case, I am very much a leader in the party and very much a decision maker in the party as a deputy leader. And that's what it has to be. It has to be that when women are in positions, they have the requisite authority, they have the requisite decision-making power. And then that's when the environment becomes enabling for other women as well. That's what's important. The thing that we have to run away from is this proxy type of situation where women are not really in the rooms that matter. Right? Even in the rooms with decision-making rooms, even with other stakeholders that are outside of the party, even with other party leaders, women have to be there and have to be able to have the authority and power to make decisions on behalf of the party as leaders in the party.
A few years back, there was a whole question about whether South Africa is ready for a woman leader, right? And many were saying that, well, maybe premature to have that conversation. Is it even a conversation that should be had, from your perspective, whether the leader is female or not?
It's a conversation that needs to be had in the same way that we're having conversations about whether the president should be black or white. It's a conversation to be had. When we moved into democracy, it was important to have a leader that represented a group that had been marginalized in their own country. And so it's important that we have a conversation about should we ultimately be having a woman president, because that is leadership, that is representation of a group that is at this point registered. 58% of registered voters this year are women. And so it's important to have that conversation to say you have a population that has more women than men in South Africa. So it's an important conversation because you have to, there are needs. First of all, women are the face of poverty, particularly black women in this country. Women are most vulnerable to issues of poverty, of violence, all of that. You need to have that represented fundamentally and significantly in Parliament. You need to make sure that there is representation of that group that is vulnerable, that has been marginalized, that was marginalized during apartheid, that's marginalized even today. We have to have that representation. And so it's an important conversation to have, because in the same way that we had the conversation about black people being represented in leadership, because of those very reasons, you have to have the conversation about women being represented.
Let's then, as we went on the conversation, Nobuntu, talk about the role of society. You talk about majority of voters being women and number of women, women as decision makers at homes, at work and so on, and just behind the scenes, as it were. What role then does society play in changing the status quo, especially as we are heading to elections that many are saying that this could be, excuse the phrase, a new dawn?
Women play an important role first when we talk about society, because women have got to back other women, and women have got to trust in other women to duly represent not only them but society. When you talk about the march of women to the Union buildings in 1956, that march wasn't just for women. That march was for society as a whole. It was to say that to keep our families together, it was to say to be able to have access to economic opportunity, we need for the past laws to fall. And so it's important that you have society, you have women pushing for women to represent not only themselves, but society, and knowing that women will represent society, because women are the ones who generally will be the people who hold families together and who lead families. That's the first. The second group of society is men. You have to make sure that you have the kind of men that are supportive of women leadership, that we talk about an enabling environment, that are not toxic to the leadership of women in parties. And I mean, we have that in our party, and that's why I'm able to lead as a woman in my party, because I have a leader, and there are other leaders who are men who are respectful of women leadership and who are there to support an enabling environment for women leadership. Thirdly, players like media are very important. Broadcasters are very important. When you are deciding, we're having a debate, there are women candidates, there are women leaders, they exist. Make sure you invite them too, so that you don't have a boys' choir speaking about the issues of South Africa when more than 50% of the people in this country are women.
Nobuntu, we're out of time, but thank you so much for coming through to speak to us.
Thank you for having me. I
appreciate your time. Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster, who is the co-founder and deputy leader of BOSA. Let's recap your top story.